Good afternoon, everyone, or good morning for some of you. I'm very happy to welcome you all in this very first session of our Smartees Summer School. For the ones who don't know it yet, every Wednesday during July and August, during the summer, we would like to inspire you with some content, some webinar content we already hosted before. First up is our collaboration for growth Smartees webinar, and the presenters for today are Sophie and Dries. The weather is not that perfect here in Belgium, it is, but I'm sure Sophie and Dries will bring up the summer with their content. So enjoy the session.
Thank you, Natalie, and great to see you all here for this first webinar in our summer school called Collaboration for Growth. I'm Sophie, Senior Research Manager at Insights Consulting for about 8 years now. I started Insights immediately after my university, and today with a passion for qualitative research, I mainly focus on insights and innovation research for big FMCG or CPG clients such as Lotus Bakeries, Ferrero, Coca-Cola and Carlsberg. And in my free time, I'm actually a member and a proud member of a book club where we occasionally read a good book, but to be honest, most of the time it's just a reason to get together with a bunch of women and enjoy a good glass of wine. Sitting next to me is my colleague Dries.
Indeed. Hello everyone. I am 26 years old and senior research consultant at Insights Consulting, and mainly working for the FMCG sector. In my spare time, as you can read on the slide, I love to play football or golf, and during weekends or in the evenings, I love to visit a trendy bar or a good restaurant.
In this first session, which is called Collaboration for Growth, we hope to inspire you by telling you and how to dig for goals, and how will we do this, or what is the content we will share with you for the next coming hour. We will share with you 7 key challenges which we feel companies are facing today and that are preventing them to grow, or that they are struggling with to grow even further. Dries will present those to you, and then in the second part of the session, which we hope to bring you some inspiration on how to solve these challenges, how to overcome these current barriers, and to offer you some inspiration as to how you can further increase the growth within your company. 2 times 7 challenges, 7 solutions. Maybe a first point to make here is that we do not believe that these are one-on-one built next to each other, or that one solution is a one-on-one answer to a challenge which companies are facing today. These are just to inspire you, and we truly believe that some of the solutions can help you to overcome several barriers, or that one barrier needs to be solved by offering several solutions. But I believe much more will become clearer in the next hour, so I'll pass the floor on to Dries, who will present you the key challenges which companies are facing today.
Thanks for the introduction, Sophie. So as Sophie said, the presentation of today is actually all about growing. And the first challenge we have is that we see that nowadays it's not evident any longer for economies and companies to grow. So the first thing to take into account is definitely globalization. 10 years ago, globalization was the solution for growth. But nowadays, globalization is the challenge itself. A new market is always different from the markets that companies are currently active in. Plus, you are facing a lot of different and local players in that market that know the market and the consumer better than you do. So penetrating a new market is no longer just a copy-paste of the successful formula from the home market into the new market. We really need to think about who will our competitors be, what will our price setting be like, our brand image, and so on. Copy-pasting is not the solution here. The second challenge is that things go faster than ever. For people in the business, I don't think I need to give much explanation on this, as this is everywhere around. The due date of creations and innovations becomes shorter. Trends and subcultures come and go, and it becomes extremely difficult to launch a product on the market that does not already exist at the moment it is launched. And this can be really frustrating for companies. So it's all about being fast, and especially being faster than others. Next, we see a new and young generation, Generation Y, that is ready to take over management positions. They have a completely different vision on management, make use of other KPIs, and they are questioning the current management. This means an important change on how companies will be managed in the future. Challenge number 4, me, myself, and I. Today, mass marketing, as it was done in the past, like for example on Times Square, is not effective anymore. Consumers expect relevant messages that are specific and preferably personalized at any time. Companies should convince consumers why their offer, their product or their brand is relevant for them, the individual consumer. We also face new technologies, and it's sometimes difficult for a company to decide where to communicate or what specific social media to use. For example, media like Snapchat, Vine or Instagram are heavily used today. From a strategic point of view, it will be important to think more in depth about what content to share via what specific channel. And consumers ask for 24/7 relevant content via the channel they are using at that specific moment of the day. This will be a huge challenge for the coming decades in terms of communication, and this challenge started already yesterday. Brands, brands, brands. Are they still strong, and are they still as strong as we believe? Sales of branded products in Western Europe decreased in 2014 with 0.5%, while the opposite was true for private labels. Discounters even increased with almost 2%, 1.9 to be specific. So brands are facing more competition than ever, and it also becomes more socially acceptable to use private labels when having guests at home, for example. And maybe you won't show the private label packaging to your guests, but consumers are confident that their guests won't taste the quality difference anymore. So, are brands still strong? We will give the answer in a few minutes. The final challenge are that the companies themselves need to get rid of the tunnel vision. We all know how things go. R&D develops products, and only when the product is ready, it goes to the marketing department, and from there it goes to the sales team. So everyone within the organization thinks within its own specialty without taking consumer needs as a driving factor for innovation. So these were the 7 challenges we are currently facing, but in fact this shows that things are getting more difficult than they were before, and also that we are playing a different ball game as a few years ago. For example, in the past we used the 80-20 Pareto rule as the golden rule. Today we see that the percentages shift to 60% of the clients being responsible for 40% of the revenue, and this will even be stronger in the future and go to a 50-50 ratio. The term loyalty will become fluffier and fluffier, and it will be more difficult to keep clients on your side in the future. We also see that life cycles of Fortune 500 companies are getting shorter. While in the previous century their life cycle was 50 years, now this is only 15 years. A third observation is that companies launch more innovative products than ever before, but 70% of them fail. And then the final observation is that technologies do not longer have a single impact on your personal life, but especially on your professional life. Oxford University states that 45% of the American jobs will be done by computers in the next 20 years. This to prove that our current management models have their limits. The models are still valid, that for sure, but we should be aware of the challenges of this century while using the models of the previous one. And this is one of these models, and probably you know this one, namely the Ansoff matrix. This model shows 4 growth strategies by 2 axes, being existing versus new markets and existing versus new products. For example, a company that has a product in one market that is successful and thereafter tries to conquer another market or country with this product is following the market penetration strategy. And this is exactly what Tea Sugars is doing in the US, being active in Western Europe for ages with successful products, and now they recently launched products overseas. So the model is still valid, but we should keep the previous challenges in mind while using it. And that's exactly what Benjamin Franklin already told us more than 300 years ago. If you do the same over and over again, you should not expect a different outcome. And in the following part, Sophie will, while taking these challenges into account of course, focus on the things that need to be changed to make growth possible in the coming years.
Thank you, Dries. I hope you're still here, after having brought you not a dooming future, but just to give you some of the key challenges that companies are today facing. So without much further ado, let's talk about solutions and how we can overcome these challenges. And a first solution to come to growth is to speed up your internal clock. One of the big challenges these days, as Dries mentioned, is to handle the big amount of data and consumer trends. And one of the solutions we feel here is to speed up your internal clock of the company. Be sure you know the trends before these really become mainstream and other companies can benefit from it. Most organizations these days are not really in sync with the speed of the real world. One method that has proved its merits before is bringing the consumer in the heart of your company and involving them in the whole product development process. By doing so, research and development can be done quicker and more adapted to what consumers really want. This helps to be aware of the trends when these are happening instead of being aware of trends when others have already developed products or services as an answer to these trends. A decent knowledge of consumer helps to stay ahead of the curve. You will be one of the first marketeers to be involved with consumers and their needs, resulting in new product development adapted to their needs. Look at what is happening in the hotel sector today, for instance. While many hotel chains are still focusing on having a mobile check-in and a self-service, others, such as Starwood, Hyatt and the Hilton, are ahead of the curve in this. They are currently experimenting to get access to your room via your mobile phone. You don't need to check in nor ask for a key of your room at the front desk. Very convenient if you ask me. Also in the payment sector, these kinds of mobile apps and these kinds of mobile trends are used. Look at what Starbucks announced in October 2014, and that is that via their app you can order food or drinks while you're on the way to the shop, and you can even pay your bill via the app, so you no longer have to wait in line to pay for your order or to get your order. You just pick it up and you go. Taco Bell, by the way, recently announced a similar idea. To prove that big companies often struggle with new trends and are often lagging behind is maybe the selfie stick trend, the trend of 2014. Probably some of you got a selfie stick recently as a present. I don't know whether you actually watched the selfie stick into detail, but I'm quite sure that it wasn't made by a famous brand such as Canon, Kodak, or Pentax, but probably a very unknown brand. If you want to buy a selfie stick, you'll find brands on them such as Rolei, Eye Protect and Safi. All unknown brands, yet lean and mean startup companies who were flexible enough to quickly jump on the selfie stick trend while it was still relevant for the consumer, and the big brands are clearly lagging behind here. And to show that it's a big trend, this is a recent picture that I took with a bunch of friends in Lisbon last weekend with the selfie stick. The challenge here is still to make sure that the selfie stick isn't on the picture itself, which is maybe an innovation which could be further triggered and could be further or could make the selfie stick more relevant for the future. To speed up that internal clock, it's also important that collaboration has an organization-wide impact, involving various stakeholders in the company, depending on their relationship with consumers and their level within the organization. So connecting with consumers or customers is not only for the marketeers or managers of the company, also frontline employees that are in contact with consumers every day via customer service, for example, need to think about this. For instance, bus drivers, they also need to understand how their behavior and attitude impacts consumer perceptions. They should act every day from a consumer or a user perspective, and that's why these connections also from an internal point of view are very relevant, and make sure that every employee within the company has his or her nose in the same direction as management. With Insights Consulting, we did a project to connect the staff of Unilever and more specifically more than 600 R&D people with the way English consumers lead their lives and use their products. Traditionally, an R&D department is a department that is very much focused on technology-driven improvements without taking into account that consumer need or what consumers really want. And this changed significantly after this consumer immersion, where we literally were the bridging function between R&D colleagues and English consumers. Another example here is what we did for Dorel, for instance. Dorel, the company behind very popular brands such as Quinny and Maxi Cosi. We conducted a consumer consulting board to reposition their Quinny brand towards the new target group of urban parents. We collaborated with over 120 urban parents in 7 big cities around the world, and they were invited to work with us for 3 weeks, and in the end they generated over 2,900 posts, both in words as well as in pictures. And this connection with the target group had actually quite some impact on the company and on the positioning of the brand and the way forward. First of all, the brand was completely repositioned towards the city lifestyle and could create relevant solutions for the urban parents. The Quinny brand was no longer targeting the mainstream parent, it was specifically targeted towards those urban parents. To give you an example of one of the things that was changed after the research, and this was the communication campaign. On this slide you can see the new print ad and the old one, and the question here to the audience is, which one do you think is the new one, the left one or the right one? So just give me your answers, left or right. You can type them in the box on the left hand side in the corner. Just type left or right, which one you believe is the new one. The majority I see is I have some other people still typing here. Good to see that the majority is right. Indeed, the right one is the new one. Quinny learned that the brand needed to shift towards a more social context, taking into account more the modern family, and this is also changed in the way families are portrayed in these types of communication. The focus should be on the child and the parent, as is the case on the right-hand side, and no longer on the looks of the mother, which is more the case on the left-hand side, with the mom there, also the high heels. So the right hand side takes much more the family focus into consideration. Next to changes in branding and communication, the Consumer Consulting Board also helped Quinny in better prioritizing their product innovations. For example, one of the results was that urban parents often use their stroller for grocery shopping. Quinny's shopping baskets that were attached to these strollers were if you look at them from a historical point of view, they were always rather small. Therefore, a project was initiated after the Consumer Consulting Board to redesign the strollers to make them much more suitable to combine grocery shopping with your child. And next to product features, new product developments were also made in the fuzzy front end. The product development team learned that urban parents feel limited in the distance that they can cover in a city compared to their life before they had children. This insight made the design team decide to rework a previously designed stroller concept. And here you see an example of that stroller, which is called a longboard stroller, which is currently still in beta testing. And it's a typical example of how the voice of the consumer can inspire the product development team and make product innovations more relevant. A second solution towards that growth is that the ever-changing world is to focus more on people which are more niche and less mainstream. Those consumers which are typically harder to reach with our products, services or brands, or those consumers who no longer buy our products. Therefore, it could be interesting to start learning from the edges, from people who have stopped using our products, from people who have a low NPS, for people who are currently today not using our products or not as much as the other type of consumers. Learn from what stops them from buying, what are their specific barriers, and use them to create growth. General Mills, for instance, they wanted to grow their brand in the US, Pillsbury. They have products such as pizza dough and ingredients, and to do so and to make sure that growth for Pillsbury happened, they focused on Hispanics, as you know, a growing community in the United States, and they focused on how they deal with food and what their specific eating habits are. They could gain trial with these Hispanic households because they gained consumer empathy and uncovered specific needs that these Hispanics had. And one of the conclusions that Pillsbury drew from this specific research was the fact that Hispanics had no idea on how to integrate these typical American products into their cultural Hispanic food traditions. So Pillsbury helped these Hispanic households to keep their cultural traditions, including some American touches to help grow their brand. Another example from the other side of the ocean is the Lucozade energy brand, and also shows how you can learn from the edges. As you may know, Lucozade is one of the biggest energy drinks in the UK and has a very long tradition to focus on social fun. Traditionally, energy drinks have a very dominant male target group. However, Lucozade wanted to enlarge that specific target group without alienating the original male one. And to do so, they launched the Lucozade Energy Pink Lemonade. It's not just a new flavor they launched, they needed an elegant answer with a mainstream flavor on the shelf that, until they looked very male with the colors blue and black on the shelf. By the way, this product was one of the most successful product launches in the UK in 2014. As a third solution, we feel that brand still beats product. The brand does no longer stand out from the crowd by delivering a better service or a better quality. Consumers expect brands today to be much more than that, and they expect a brand to be engaging and to add value coming from a very emotional experience. Consumers have very high expectations today, and that makes that they easily switch to other brands, also private labels, but it's in the emotional component and it's in that emotional connection that we believe brands can still make the difference. Look at what Whopper did, for instance, in Brazil. They had the campaign there where when you order a Whopper, they snap you, they print your face on the front of the packaging, and the reactions were captured and then spread globally. You could, there are several videos on YouTube and on other social media of this campaign, so you should look it up. There are some very surprising but also some very happy faces as a result of this, and I think it's a very good example of how you as a brand can still make that emotional connection with consumers. Another example is Danone, which due to FCA regulations in the European Union was forced no longer to communicate on the functional benefits and the functional aspects of their products, and they had to communicate much more on an emotional level about yogurt. Together with us, they are doing a structural community in Belgium and the Netherlands, and this is, for instance, a screenshot of the French community or the community in the southern part of Belgium, where they are in constant connection and in constant dialogue with their target group to help understand and to communicate better on these emotional aspects rather than the pure functional benefits of the brand. So brands can still beat products, but we should all play on the emotion and show relevance on an individual level rather than talking to the mass target group. Embrace we as a forced solution to growth. I'm sure you may have noticed how sports fans talk about their favorite sports team. Everything they say is about we. We won the game, we should not have used this tactic, luck was not on our side, it's we. If your employees, your customers and other stakeholders are talking about we, it's a sign that you're definitely doing a good job on this embrace we solution. Another brand which is clearly an example of that we culture is Alfa Romeo. They have a hugely successful Alfista community which runs in several languages in multiple countries all over the world. And in these communities, owners but also just lovers of Alfa Romeo share their stories, their experiences, tips and tricks on the car, but also on the whole context related to their car, which from every now and then is also a way to make sure that these talks and these tips and tricks got onto actual development at Alfa Romeo. Another good example here is Mobile Vikings, which is a mobile virtual network operating in Belgium, the Netherlands and Poland. And here also we see that these employees really act as Vikings. If their CEO talks to them, they are addressed as Vikings rather than by their own name. And they very much play on that emotional aspect, but also on the embrace we feeling. You are one of us and we are the same as you. We understand you. A final example of that embrace we solution is Van de Moortele. Van de Moortele is active in basically two product groups. On the one hand, frozen bakery products, and on the other hand, margarines and fats. And in that embrace we feeling, they decided to make an investment in a high technology oven based on consumer feedback of a community that we did with them. The fifth solution comes from cherishing diversity. Traditional management practices believed for a very long time in homogeneity, with organizations grouping individuals that are in fact mainly copycats of one another. However, in today's world, diversity becomes much more important. By opening up to a more diverse set of skills, to a more diverse set of people having different backgrounds, having different interests and having different skills, we will all be able to do better. Research even found that companies in the top quartile for gender and or racial diversity are much more likely to have a financial return above average. A classic example of that cherished diversity solution is Starbucks. The globalization of Starbucks and conquering some die-hard coffee countries where more people drink tea was for sure also possible because of their culture of diversity and inclusion. Starbucks is very proud to stimulate a culture that values and respects this diversity and inclusion. Another example here is the United Nations, where obviously diversity is one of the core aspects of what they do, but they even bring it one step further, and employees of the United Nations get their own national holiday as a day off and do not have to necessarily take the day off when the country where they are residing and the country where they are working is having a day off. They get their own national holiday as a day off. Some of you may know the movie Moneyball, which stars Brad Pitt, which is the reason why I know the movie, but actually the movie is also the story of the Oakland Athletics baseball team and their manager Billy Beane. He shaped a team with a much lower budget than many other teams, and together with an analyst, they watched the bigger picture. Because of budget restrictions, all players of the major leagues were analyzed on their merit and where each player would fit best to compose the ideal team instead of focusing on star players only. Because of this method, they could compete with teams with a much higher budget, such as the New York Yankees with a budget of over $125 million, while they had to deal with only $41 million. The result was that they got into the playoffs of 2002 and 2003, so in that respect it really paid off. A sixth solution to facilitate and to increase that growth are peer-to-peer connections. We see that peer-to-peer connections are becoming much more important as a solution to grow these days. Messages coming directly from marketeers are perceived as much less attractive and relevant for consumers, and these peer-to-peer connections are preferred. So as a brand, make sure that these peer-to-peer connections are also facilitated by you and that you do not leave it to just the peers, but that you as a brand also have a say in these peer-to-peer connections. You might know the Unicorn Club. This is a club of 39 US-based software companies founded after 2003, valued more than $1 million by investors. On average, 4 unicorns were born every year in the past decade, and but really all of these companies are literally based on peer-to-peer connections, both in a B2B world such as LinkedIn, but also in a B2C world such as Uber and Airbnb. And Airbnb is actually a very good example. To be honest, I no longer use Airbnb as a cheaper solution to stay somewhere these days. Many hotels have cheaper options available. The reason why I and many travelers still choose Airbnb is because of that social human connection. The owner of the place you rent gives you tips on a cultural event, on a good restaurant, and these tips are often very different from the ones that you find in traveler's guides, such as the Lonely Planet or the Rough Guides. I don't know whether you recently checked out the city where you live in one of these traveler books, but I bet that you don't often go to the restaurants that are described in these books and in these guides. They're usually not the restaurants where you recently went yourself, and they are typically the restaurants where you will find a lot of tourists and where you will be sitting next to people of your own country rather than locals. So more and more tourists are searching for that authentic local connection instead. And then a seventh and last solution for growth has to do with the first challenge that Dries named at the beginning of this webinar. We're one, but we're not the same. And as an answer to that challenge, it is respecting the local culture and identity as a universal or a global brand. On the picture you see here, you see 3 visuals of the 2015 IKEA catalog. It's a Turkish, a Chinese and an American catalog, and at first sight they all 3 look very much the same, although there are 7 differences, or 6 differences that can be spotted on these 3 pictures. Let's get interactive again and take a close look at the pictures and write down the differences you spot between all 3 of them. Indeed, the oven, the sink, the color of the oven, I don't know what the word in English is, but the appliance that is above the fireplace is also very different. And if you look at the Turkish picture, it's indeed very specific for the Turkish market compared to what you see on the Chinese and the American market. Also the chairs are the same, but also the lamps are quite different. So making sure that even though they have a unique range of products and they have a global range of products, IKEA makes sure that in their catalogs the specifics of each country are made clear and that each person feels as though the kitchen that is in the catalog could be their kitchen rather than the kitchen for another country. Another example here is what Johnny Walker did. At the end of the 90s, they witnessed a drop in sales, so they started a campaign based on the universal value, which was the value to chase your dreams, and they started using the slogan, "Keep walking." The slogan was a very global one, but they executed it locally with very local known persons. In China, for instance, they used the Chinese philosopher Lao Tzu with the tagline, "1,000 miles begins with a single step." It's a slogan and a person with whom Chinese consumers can identify, and it worked really well. In Germany, they used Hannibal as an example, where they used the tagline, "It's not, if there's not a way, we'll make the way." So again, making it very locally relevant by using a person which is known in Germany. An example of how not to do it here is Fiat. They wanted to conquer the Chinese market with Richard Gere as a spokesperson. However, as you might know, Richard Gere is a big fan of Tibet. So needless to say that by using Richard Gere in the Chinese market to promote Fiat wasn't really a good idea, and he didn't really last long in this campaign for the car brand. Another example of localization this time is a research that we did for Philips, and it was called the Sleep Well Community, a 3-month project to assess the sleeping market in the Asia-Pacific region and to get insights into sleeping routines with a specific funnel approach, making sure that on the one hand, we were able to understand what the specific habits are, but also to really deep dive into what the local nuances was. And since this was a medical topic, it's much more sensitive as well. In order to draw the right conclusions in this unknown market for our researchers, we needed more cultural context. And this is also why we invited 10 extra participants as our cultural experts to help us as co-researchers. Their main purpose was not to give us answers. Their main reason why we invited them into the research was to make sure that we interpret the data with the right context, and they helped us in analysis rather than providing new answers. In the end, more than 14% of our conclusions of that specific project were challenged and were reshaped with them to make sure that they were locally relevant. So these were the 7 solutions that we had for you as a way to grow as a company in a changing world. First of all, speed up your internal clock. Make sure that you are well aware of the consumer trends as they are happening, rather than if they have already happened and the competition has already come up with a solution towards that trend. Learn from the edges. Make sure that you take into account people that are not typically your target group, people that have specific barriers, and see what you can learn from them to start innovating either in product or in communication. Brands still beat products. Make sure that as a brand you build that emotional connection. A lot of brands today are no longer, or consumers realize that brands are today no longer making the difference in terms of product and service, but it's in that emotional connection that you can still make the difference. Embrace we. Also from an internal perspective, look for people with very different skill set, very different backgrounds, both culturally as well as for instance educationally, to make sure that we learn from each other. Cherish diversity. Remember the Starbucks example here, where through cherishing diversity they have been able to grow in die-hard coffee countries, which on a first level would have been very hard to penetrate. Sixth, those peer-to-peer connections, the Unicorn Club. Peer-to-peer connections today are a solution to make sure that you are able to grow as a brand, and Airbnb as an example here to show you that people are not only looking for a cheaper solution, they are looking for that local human answer to their question rather than something that could be written in a travel guide. And then the 7th solution was globalization. Even for global brands, make sure that all of your solutions and all of your communication is tailored towards local specificities. Make sure that it is adapted to the local market, and even with a global campaign you can bring local touches and local nuances to make sure that it's really relevant within a specific country. These are the 7 solutions that we wanted to present you, but obviously there might still be even an 8th or a 9th solution. It's not that today we want to present the holy grail to you on how to grow. This was just a list of solutions that we have seen with our clients and by reading around as the key parameters that are present in companies which are growing today, but obviously other examples of how you as a company are convinced are convinced that help you grow are of course also very welcome. So Dries and I would like to invite you to maybe come up with an 8 or 9 solution towards growth if you want now, but also maybe during the next couple of days. If you come up with a 8 or 9 solution on how to grow, just drop us an email or give us a tweet. That's it for the content part, or that's it basically for us talking. So let's go to the Q&A. If you have any dying questions or things that you would like to know, things that you're missing or feel that inspired you to shape your business plans for the next couple of weeks and months, feel free to share those.
All right. First of all, thanks a lot, Sophie and Dries, for kicking off this Smartees Summer School. And it was already a successful one, looking at all the interaction during the session. So that's very nice to start with. I have 2 questions. One of Mathilde, and her question is, do you have any concrete examples on how employees can collaborate for growth?
I do have some concrete examples, and I'm just adjusting my headset because it's giving me a hard time. I hope it's better now. One of the concrete examples on how employees can collaborate for growth is, I think, first of all, make sure that each employee within the company knows who the customers are and make sure that they know who they are working for. What we are today facing is still a world where a lot of knowledge is still within the marketing department or within the consumer insights department and is not being shared throughout the whole company. So I feel that's one of the areas where first of all employees can still collaborate for growth, is to start sharing knowledge with them, start making sure that they change their minds, they know who their consumers are, and from there on that they can start working with you to also make sure that they are in for ideation, for instance.
Thanks a lot, Sophie. I hope this was an answer to your question. I have a second question from Melissa, and her question is how to bring your consumer into the room, but specific for B2B companies. Do you have an example about that?
I do actually. I think for a B2B company there are 2 ways to bring consumers or to bring consumers into the boardroom. I think first of all, and we do this for quite some companies, is by taking into account your consumer. Even though you're in a B2B company, and I realize it's sometimes much harder, it is possible to set up consumer collaboration or collaborations with your consumers or your direct clients, even if you are in a B2B environment. What I can share here is a project we did for ATAG, which is a Dutch kitchen appliance manufacturer, and they were in the situation where where a consumer is going to a kitchen appliance store and they are no longer they don't ask for a specific ATAG. They talk to the vendor or they talk to the representative there, and the representative is basically giving them the kitchen appliance or offering them the kitchen appliance most of the time on which they have the highest revenue, and that with which company they can go on a cruise or they get an extra incentive. To make sure that the people in the store selling those kitchen appliances are also thinking more about the consumer, ATAG set up a consumer collaboration going directly to the end consumer, and with that knowledge on the end consumer then going towards their clients. And it's actually a technique you see much more in a B2B company to as a research or as a target group for research, they sometimes go towards the end consumer and bring that knowledge on the end consumer towards their clients, and then start a dialogue with their clients on how to better service that specific consumer. So I feel that it's definitely also possible in a B2B environment, if that answers your question.
Heel busy.
Thank you, Sophie. Just in case you have any additional questions, it doesn't have to ask them now. The contact details of both Sophie and Dries are on the slide, so you can always contact them afterwards if you have any additional questions or feedback, of course. We're at the end of the session. I want to thank you a lot for joining us. I hope you got inspired, but don't forget that we are ready to inspire you the rest of the summer as well. So I would suggest you have a look on our Smartees website and check out our upcoming sessions, and maybe we can inspire you even more in the upcoming weeks, and hopefully the sun will be there as well. So thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Bye-bye.